Welcome to the Mom and podcast. We're your hosts, Suzanne Kearns
and Missy Stevens. We want to help you through everything that happens in the ellipses, from your professional life to your emotional health.
You're a mom and so much more. Let's figure out what comes next together.
Welcome to the Mom and podcast, where our mission is to help moms figure out who they are in the ellipses, or that beyond motherhood. I'm Missy Stevens, mom and writer, foster care advocate, and this week I'm an old person with a Taylor's bunion, and I don't want to talk about it unless it's to complain.
Oh, I want that to be my look this week. And I'm Suzanne Kearns. I'm a mom and writer, LGBTQ ally, and this week, Writers League of Texas Conference attendee. And our guest today is someone near and dear to our hearts, Ann Imig. Ann is a certified positive psychology coach with a master's in social work, creative multi-hyphenate, and Listen to Your Mother show founder. And speaking of Listen to Your Mother, we don't usually suck up to our guests this much, but I've got merch. I've got merch. So welcome, Ann. We are so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
And yes, so we know you as, like I said, I even have the shirt. I had to get it out of the laundry.
It's just dirty.
It's seen better days.
That's how you know it's a good one.
It's a good one.
It gets a lot of use. But so obviously we know you through the Listen to Your Mother show. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We'd really want to focus on your new adventure. But just for anybody who I don't know where they've been under a rock if they don't know you from Listen to Your Mother. Could you give our audience a little bit of a high-level Ann 101 about your career path and your family, and then we'll dive into your work?
Sure. Well, I met my husband at a musical theater. So I started out as an actress, and he was a drummer in the pit right by Rocky Mountain National Park in Grand Lake, Colorado. And we moved to Chicago. I'm not going to give you my whole life story, but all becomes pertinent, I promise.
There you go.
And we both experimented with different careers, as you can imagine, being artists, both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up working with a career coach starting in our 20s, who I still work with. She's still working today. She's in her 80s, and her name is Robin Shearer.
That's amazing.
Amazing. And part of that journey for me led me back to graduate school, where I got a master's in social work right about exactly the same time I had my first child. So we lived in Chicago for about 10 years. And my mom is a social worker. My sister is a social worker. Like, I kind of always knew I was probably going to end up there somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But then we moved back to my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. And my husband became a consultant and was traveling constantly. And in 2008, when I had a preschooler and a toddler, I started blogging as like catharsis and just trying to bend all of the parenting stress into humor, and really just found connection among creative people online to get through those, decades-long days. And then my theater background combined with my social work background, combined with my creative writer, community connector person, all came together to launch the storytelling project called Listen to Your Mother, which started as just a show that I did in 2010 here in Madison, just wanting to bring community together around Mother's Day, because I felt like Mother's Day deserves more than brunch.
Yes.
And wanting to bring people together on stage and in the audience that don't normally come together. Madison's a very segregated town, for as progressive as we, tout ourselves as being. So I did that first show very quickly. It all came together in just a few months, and put it online, the whole thing online. And because I was blogging and I had made all these creative connections, people started to email me wanting to do the show. And it was very much of that moment. That's why it had this like meteoric rise and became a YouTube channel and a book and a sensation, and really a women's leadership incubator, because as you all well know, not only did we stage shows all over North America, but people who had never directed or produced or even held events became local producers. And it was just this surge of motherhood storytelling and community.
Yes.
It was so magical. I was in the 2012 cast here. And Suzanne, you were in 2016 and then
Yeah.
later were a producer, correct?
Yes.
And I
And yeah,
just
to that point of I had never done
never,
anything like that
right?
before. That
I
was
had
just,
never stood on a stage and done that
mhm.
and read my work out loud. And I just, what you did for women, what you did for mothers, helping us as mothers, helping us really amplify our stories. I loved giving motherhood a microphone. Thought it was amazing.
Mhm.
It's just always going to be one of the great honors of my life and one of my favorite memories ever. And I won't put words in Suzanne's mouth, but I think she feels the same.
I do. And I mean, in addition to that, I mean, doing the producing of it was just, I mean, for a stay-at-home mom, I mean, that felt like, hey, that's something I can put on a resume. I mean,
Absolutely.
that takes a lot of organization and selling the tickets and arranging the venue and all these things. But even just getting up and speaking in front of a group, that helped me to later feel confident in speaking in front of the school
Yeah.
board and eventually even testifying at the state capitol and doing those things. But I think going back to that community aspect that you were talking about, I mean, that's how I met Kristen Shaw and
Yep.
Leanne Torres, who were the producers that I did my show with.
Your show.
And
Yeah.
and then they were on last week's. We do a live show at Tipsy Ellipses recording every month. And so we had our text thread. I'm sure you have one of these, Anne, where
Yes,
it's your
multiple.
friends that you get like 200 text messages from
Yeah.
every day. So we invited our text thread to come join us. And so Kristen and Leanne are on that. And then, of course, Wendy Aarons, who was one of the original producers of the show in Austin. And just someone that has been a big part in my life as far as both her and Kristen, like these legit writers who have
Hmm.
made me feel more legit about my writing and the fact that they actually read it and look at it and
Yes.
say nice things about it occasionally. So it's just been such an amazing journey. And you've given that to women across the whole country. And it's still
Yes.
kind of going on in some other markets. So I I mean, you talked a little bit why you started Listen to Your Mother, but now you've made this, I'd call it a pivot, but it's a little more than a pivot. It's kind of a, ooh, it's
It's
kind
kind of a
of a,
leap.
it is kind of a leap and stepping away. Although it sounds like, the social work aspect has not been too far from your calling throughout life, but really curious about, was it a struggle to make that decision to leave, Listen to Your Mother, make this change? And did you leave it to make this change, or was that part of a process? Like what was going on in the head of Anne during all of this?
So you might not realize like that decision making process started over 5 years ago. I mean,
Wow.
so in a nutshell, what started out as this energizing, motivating vehicle that kept me afloat when my children were little became this enormous behemoth that sort of took me for a ride.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
eventually, I really got to the place where I'm like, I really want to focus back on my kids. It's so ironic because I used to be like, Mother's Day needs more than just brunch. And then I was kind of like, I kind of just want to have a brunch on Mother's Day.
I'm done with this work. Yeah.
Honest to God. As
I
much
get
as it
that.
was like soul filling and thrilling and, beyond my wildest imagination, it also was way more than I bargained for.
Mhm.
So that's the why, but the how took a lot of planning and execution. And because this project is so near and dear to the communities, the producers, we knew we were just going to like rip it from people's hands. So we,
Mhm.
in 2016, working with all of the people who were already active on the project, let them know 2017 is going to be the grand finale year. So we planned before that year even came. And
Yeah.
and then it turned out I was able to make a deal with a theatrical licensing company so that in fact we weren't even ripping it out of anyone's hands at all, which was just a bonus and it required a whole other deal and a lot of work. And in fact, I still own Listen to Your Mother, the brand, and anyone who wants to do it, just like I don't know why I always use cats as an example, but just like you would do cats or Fiddler on the Roof, like you get the licensing for it and you can do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so theaters have done it, and some of the original, like I just went to the Twin Cities show,
Yeah, I saw
um,
that.
Yes.
and that was the first show I'd been to in 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and St. Louis, like there are still some
Mm-hmm.
cities that go way back and just new people who get to do it and it lives on.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And what I would say about the pivot is that you can see from the logo, like the word listen is always what loomed largest in the project.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's actually like when I wrote my application, up there it is on the mug. And that was by design. And when I wrote my application for graduate school, it was all about listening. So this is sort of my strength and my personal mission statement in one word, and the most important part of coaching. So it
Yeah.
made total sense to me. The backstory is that as I look, so my children are now a freshman and senior in high school, like
Mm-hmm.
vroom, you know,
Yes.
Yeah.
boom. And as I start to look ahead, I already know how hard it's going to be to move on to the next phase of my life as much as I'm so excited for my children. And I just wanted to figure out what was next for me in my career so that that wouldn't also be this huge stress I was faced with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking I was going to finally become that therapist that I intended to become before the whole writing Listen to Your Mother thing happened. And I started doing a bunch of continuing education prep. I needed to get my license renewed. And it just was not working for me on so many levels. I felt out of touch. I felt like I got this degree 15 years ago and I never got started. I felt behind the ball. And it was going to be a ton of work and cost me money. And
Yeah.
like to even, and then become licensed, a licensed clinical social worker is another 2 years after
Mm-hmm.
it would take me 2 years just to get the license I used to have.
Right.
Wow.
And yeah, so this is when I circled back to the coach that I mentioned earlier, Robin Shearer. And we had talked about my becoming a coach. In fact, in my 20s, I had said, like, I think I want to become a life coach, or I think I want to become a coach like you. And she very lovingly and gently said to me, like, you sort of have to live your life first before you can, like,
How about you not be 20 and do that? Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I was like 26, so 27 maybe. But and then over the years, she has mentioned it to me, and it just was never the right time and it didn't
Yeah.
feel right. And she had another client who had done this positive psychology coaching certification. And
Mhm.
it also resonated because my own mood had gotten really low and I knew I needed to do something about it. So I kind of thought, maybe I'll just take a class. Like, I'm not going to sign up for
Mm.
the certification right away. And then once I took that first class, I was just, because I also,
You were in.
anyone can become a coach and you don't need any sort of certification or license to call yourself a coach. That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And I did feel like I do have this master's degree, but I also, if I'm going to go into the coaching marketplace, I want to have not only a specialty, but I want to feel confident in what I'm offering.
Mm-hmm.
Have
And
some
that is,
credentials.
yeah. And that is what I found. And more than like the letters after my name, having the like this framework that
Mm-hmm.
gave me confidence and that I believed in. And that is absolutely what I got becoming certified as a positive psychology coach.
I think we want to talk about that a little bit because it's a term that we
Yes.
don't know, right? Like
Yeah,
that's new to
we've
us.
interviewed a lot of life coaches and had never heard of this term, positive psychology. So, could you give us a little breakdown of how do you differentiate between life coaching or positive psychology
Yeah.
or
Yes.
therapy?
And then I can. And in fact, you can go to listenlifecoaching.com and click on the blog. And I've answered all those questions for people because they're like the first questions that come up.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, I
Yeah.
bet.
Um, so, briefly, coaching is helping people make change in their lives, and it's not advice giving and it's not being an expert. It's listening, asking a ton of questions, and helping people connect to their strengths and
Mm-hmm.
helping them kind of co-create their next step. So like that's coaching. Therapy is more digging into the past or when there's a crisis in your life or an overarching mental health situation that's
Yeah.
deeply affecting your day-to-day life. So sometimes therapy might need to happen before coaching or
Mm.
in addition to coaching. Coaching kind of takes place when overall, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of caveats to all of this, but you're healthy. You might not be happy. I mean, happy is like a
Right.
loaded term, you know.
Yeah.
Usually people are in a moment of somewhat of a personal crisis, even when they want coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
But basically, you need some baseline of mental health before you're really ready to coach a lot of the time. So that's sort of the distinction between coaching and therapy, but there is a lot of overlap. And I am really thankful for my background that I bring that to my coaching. Now, positive psychology. So when psychology began, we didn't have the benefit of brain scans, which is amazing. And a lot of psychology was based on what's not working, dysfunction. So positive psychology is really working with what's working, is what Tal Ben Shahar calls it. There's a whole bunch of, very famous forefathers and foremothers of this work, and he's one of them. Martin Seligman is one of them. And I think the best way to describe it, so it's neuroscience. And that's what I love about this. And all the tools that I share with my clients are evidence-based and replicated. And I use the tools all the time. And it's not about happiness. It's about well-being. And, it's very easy to see positive psychology and think like toxic positivity. This is all about just like grin and bear it or whatever, and it's 100% not that. It's normalizing that to be human is to experience suffering and to experience hardship, and that optimism and well-being is about taking hopeful actions. You don't even have to feel hopeful to do that. And that my favorite nugget to share in this context is there's a book called The How of Happiness by a woman named Sonia Lobomirsky. And it's all neuroscience, and it's broken down well-being into 50% of our well-being, whether we're kind of depressed, kind of happy, just by nature, is DNA. Like, thank you, mom and dad, grandma, great grandma, and grandpa, right? Like we get what we get. So that's half of it. Okay. Then only 10% is phase of life and what's happening. So let that sink in for a minute. When you're like, I need a new job, I need a new marriage. Like, maybe you do. Like, a lot of divorces and job changes need to happen. Don't get me wrong. But the knowledge, this is good news and bad news. The knowledge that after the change, let's say that is, you get the change you need, you're going to go back to that baseline. Now, if you're grieving, you're really glad to hear this information because you feel like you can't even get out of bed, maybe, but you will go back. And if you're like high as a kite with endorphins because of this new romance, you're going to go back to your baseline. Okay. So the amazing news is the 40% that's left over is up to us. This is huge. A huge chunk of our, it's malleable. And we can change it and we can affect it. And you can work on it every day. And it's not hard. And it doesn't mean you're going to be happy. Like, happy might not feel the same way to you as it does to me. Like, and there is a whole spectrum of positive emotions to pull from. So I'm just going to say one more thing, and I become like a preacher about this.
Sing it, sister. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. If I used to hear the word optimism, I used to think like happy-go-lucky. And like, that's just never felt like me. And I'm never going to be like, yes, I'm a glasses half full kind of gal. But really, it just means taking positive action in this context. And that I came up with this little phrase, optimism doesn't mean opposite. Like, you can make the tiniest tweak in your day. You can just pivot toward curiosity or pivot from despair into a moment of awe, looking out your window, and help yourself, literally your brain, this is the neuroscience, start from a down cycle to just help it pivot into more of an up cycle. And then the more that you divert your attention and intentionality toward these practices, the easier it is to get into the up spiral.
Yeah, that sounds similar to how the benefits of the gratitude practices and how it rewires your brain in a similar way.
So that's one of the big pieces of the research is gratitude letters and gratitude visits. It's one of, a host of practices that absolutely are clinically shown to improve your well-being.
I say this every time brain science comes up. I think that I want to do more work in brain science. I don't know what I do with that. I have no idea what that means, but it's fascinating to me that I think we spent a long time in our lives saying, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way that person is. That's just how I am. And it's amazing to me that we can literally rewire and change the way our brain's working if we make a point to work at it.
It's so true. And just to your point about that's just the way things are. Like I always grew up hearing that cliche, like people don't change.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious is they've done these studies where, if somebody were to ask you to predict how much you would change in the next 10 years, like what music you would like to listen to and, what your likes and dislikes would be and what your beliefs would be, people always way under predict their change. And all you have to do is compare yourself to the last 10 years. And it's like, oh, right, I get it.
Right. And the openness to letting people change, letting yourself change, letting the people around you change, and not putting everybody in whatever box they were in 10 years ago. I think that there's a lot of resistance, I guess, to that. We don't want people to change. We want to say, oh, you tweeted this thought 10 years ago. That means you're an asshole. Sorry, bleep that out. Well, maybe that was a really jerky thought to have 10 years ago, but people can learn and change. So I'm seeing more people open to that idea, but when there's science behind it saying we really are growing, we need to allow people that space.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of that whole idea of changing also goes along with getting unstuck. Well, that's a challenge that we as stay-at-home moms and that we hear from people in our group, in our friend circle, that they can start to feel a little stuck in their role, either as a mother or as their role, maybe even in whatever career that they have found themselves in. So just really curious how the work that you do helps get these women out of neutral, because those big changes can be really scary, but it sounds like because of your experience in making this big change, you're in a perfect position to be able to help be the living example of how it is possible. So like, how do you integrate then those lessons that you've learned to help your clients move out of that space?
Well, that's what I love about this work is it takes the mystery out of it. So we start with a strengths assessment and anyone can go and get a free, it's like a 15-minute assessment on VIA strengths. If you just Google VIA, VIA strengths, it'll give you the right link. And again, this all came out of research, scientifically developed rubric of these 24 strengths that everyone has, and it ranks them and you become aware of your top 5 signature strengths. And this is so illuminating for a lot of reasons. There will be some surprises often. And usually with those like top 5 or 10, it's like, yep, if somebody told me I couldn't use those strengths, I wouldn't be me. And essentially, if you want to get unstuck, you have to do something different. So something different could just be hiring a coach or taking a class. You can't expect to keep doing the same things and expect something different to happen.
Yep.
But with the guidance of having your strengths and sort of diving into your strengths, we start to develop strength stories where you can call on what has worked for you in the past. And it gives you great insight for what is going to work for you in the future. Because if we're still alive, we have all survived and become resilient in all sorts of different ways. And we often don't really think about what has worked. It is neuroscience, fight or flight, primitive brain function that we focus on what doesn't work. It's not a character deficit. It's just what our brains do. And to get unstuck from that, you have to consciously look at the full story of what has worked for you and how you can bring that forward. And then there's other tools and, it's not a one size fits all. Some people like to start their sessions with like deep breathing and guided meditations. And other people are like, let's get to the goal map and like, just, I am ready to go, and other people love writing and might want to do exploration about, one really effective tool is there's a study about a best life study where you write for 20 minutes as if everything in your life has gone how you hoped it would. All your fears have been put to the side. And every day you write it as though it's already happened. And this isn't about manifesting.
Yeah.
This is about being in the moment of writing this, putting down your anxieties and fears, allowing yourself to become expansive in your thinking and what you can learn from that. And so you do that 4 days in a row. On the 5th day, you sort of just look at everything you've done. And often you will get clues to what you want to do next, even if it's not like the big picture, what I want to do. It could just be, I really miss gardening. I'm going to go volunteer in the community garden. And just some little change
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
can open up worlds.
I love that because I think that's where
Yeah.
Missy and I both started the podcast originally, feeling very stuck in the I don't even know who I am anymore. Like I've been meeting
Yeah.
these kids' needs for so long. And we started out with an Enneagram coach and learned some about that. And I just think our types are the ones that just are kind of like, oh, it's fine, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Enneagram
Yeah.
9, whatever's good with you. And we actually are. I mean, it's not even just being a pushover. It's like, yeah, tacos sound good, burgers sound good, whatever you
Right.
choose. I mean, they're fine. But you kind of get that way with the bigger things in your life too.
I know.
I recently had a revelation talking to a coach we interviewed last week. I'd kind of blamed it on this stage of life of
Mhm.
having kids and forgetting who I was. But I
Yeah.
realized that it was way before that, like even choosing a college major where I just kind of, I took this test that had like 20 bubbles that we filled out in high school, and it said that I should do merchandising or marketing. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm
Okay.
going to go do marketing. And then I just kept doing that. And then I got a job that led to another job that led to another job, and never took that time to just sit and be quiet and think about that. So I love that exercise of just sitting down and letting your brain go wild with what that perfect life could look
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I wrote a story when I was like, I don't know, I want to say I was in second grade, and the teacher loved it. She thought it was really funny and just oohed and awed over it. And I don't think from that moment on, I ever considered that there was any other option but a career that had something to do with writing. And I
Yes.
think that, yes, I love to write, obviously, and I still like to tell a story, but I never allowed myself to think about anything else. And I'm almost 50. And so when Suzanne said, hey, do you want to co host this podcast? I was like, yes, I do, because I don't truly know all the facets of myself that I feel like at this age I should know. I just never even explored them. And so I'm starting to look at the other things that light me up. And maybe I will always come back to writing in some capacity, but I just think there's more there. We lock ourselves into stuff without really giving it thought.
Absolutely. And I would not generalize, but this resonates with me because one of the things that really surprised me on my own via strength assessment is that humor and creativity were a lot lower than I would have expected, having gotten into the online space as a humorist and having created Listen to Your Mother show.
Uh-huh.
And the way they define things matters too. But the
Mhm.
reason it was such a light bulb for me is like my top 5 signature strengths are like love, gratitude, spirituality, social intelligence, and perspective. I think that was 6. But people who really know me and love me, like that is Anne. That is
Yeah.
Anne. And I
Mhm.
was trying so hard to make this other thing Anne. And
Mhm.
I have those talents. I mean, I did start
Right.
out as a musical theater actress, right? But it explained to me why I used to like kind of berate myself, well, in a million ways, but also like for taking things so personally with,
Oh.
you know, whatever rejection I perceived or whatever
Mhm.
performance I felt like wasn't up to par. And I would just kill myself. And seeing this on the paper, I realized it's because I had to pull so hard. The humor that they talk about isn't like, can you write a funny post? It's like being lighthearted about life. And
Right.
I'm really not. Like, I'm just
Really not
not.
either.
So, like, I had to pull. I'm not the person who's like, they don't want me. I'll show them. Like, I wish I was, but I'm not. I'm super
Mm-mm.
sensitive. And so I just felt such clarity of like, I will continue to write books. I will continue to want to get on stage. I know I will. But
Mhm.
actually, me being my most me is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And just realizing that it just took the pressure off. It
Yeah.
took the neuroses out of it. And now when I'm having a tension with someone, I'm less likely to get into the stories that we make up. I mean, I might go
Yeah.
into it for a minute, but then I'll go, oh no, this is just because I'm not that great at teamwork. And I know that's one of her top strengths,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Now, how
Or
long did that take you? I mean, I don't mean like, was it a 3-month process? But I mean, people get kind of frustrated when they're like, I'm going to read this book or I'm going to take this class and then it's going to be done. But it's a process. I mean, we've been having conversations on a weekly basis with life coaches for 8 months and we're just finally being like, oh,
Oh.
like it takes a minute
yeah,
to get some of these things because we've had these rehearsed, memorized
yes.
like
The stories we
scripts
tell
about
ourselves.
ourselves for 50 years now. So I'm just curious what that looked like for you. I mean,
Well, it's ongoing. It's going to be
yeah.
my whole life. And I just now feel like I have the tools to deal with it. So, like, one of the most important pieces of positive psychology and sort of like administering this to yourself is self-compassion. And there's a book, a famous book. She's Austin researcher Kristen Neff. She actually has a new book out that I haven't read yet. But we talk a lot about self-care. But if we don't know how to genuinely allow ourselves self-compassion,
Mm,
which for me means putting my hand on my heart and literally saying to myself, and this is really hard for you. Like, that is what I was missing because I am highly self aware, which also is confusing because usually when I'm most confident about something, I'm wrong, by the way. But anyway, but because I am highly self aware, in the past, I would have a feeling, be like, okay, I know what this is. And I like go immediately into shoulds without
Oh.
feeling the feelings and stopping and putting my hand on my heart. I can actually almost like cry, which is so
Mhm.
good for me because I would just zoom past it.
Yes.
Um,
yeah.
so I'm not cured of these voices. I never will be, but I have
Mhm.
what used to feel like a mystery to me. Like miraculously, I would find a mantra or a phrase that worked for a while and then it wouldn't work anymore. And now I understand it's not mysterious. And now I have these tools and I still have to
Mhm.
change them and will have to, but I understand now what works and why it works.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
what a
magical.
gift.
I'm gonna
Yes.
start I need to learn more about it, but I love the idea
Yes.
of stopping and actually feeling the thing.
Read Kristen Neff's book, Self Compassion.
Okay.
That's a
Yeah.
I think
great place
someone
to
else
start.
told us about that
I'm
recently, and
sure
I put
it's
it on my list.
famous.
It may be in one of our Look, Listen,
Yeah.
Learns, but I
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
we
okay.
joke a lot when we talk about the book. Sometimes my most common response is, "Ooh, I've never heard of that one." So that we say we're going to get a T-shirt of that. So, okay, we're writing that one down. That's definitely.
Yes, and then we
And
will put it in
another
the show
one,
notes for
I
sure.
mean, there's so many good books, but another one is Learned Hopefulness by Dan Tomasulo. So
Mm.
an old psychology premise was learned helplessness.
Mhm.
And now, given how much we've learned a lot, again, because of brain scans and brain science, this big pivot happened with positive psychology and into learned hopefulness, which we do need to learn how to do. So again, it's instead of taking these things as like personal default, I'm just kind of a pessimist or I'm just not curious. It's like you can change that. And it's not you. It's just here are your strengths. Here are
Mhm.
ones that are less developed. And now you know that and you know when you need to be intentional about pulling those up.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get it clear in my head. And you mentioned there's a difference between toxic positivity and
Yes.
positive psychology. And it sounds like it's more of the awareness of things where your strengths are. And so you're not down on yourself about the things that aren't your strengths instead of trying to take the things that aren't your strengths and being like, "No, you're great at
Yeah.
math. Just keep
Right.
just
It's
keep
not that,
going."
not that.
Yeah. Or
And the other huge part of this is growth mindset. And that has become so mindset is this amazing book and work by Carol Dweck, and it is often misunderstood. But I mean, in a nutshell, it's always reaching toward curiosity and continued learning. So, it's not like I'm horrible at that, like become awesome, but maybe it is. First of all, is there a dominant narrative working where you're telling me like, I can't do a podcast. I'm terrible with technology. And I'd say, didn't you figure out how to set up a blog or hire somebody to set it up and tell me
Yeah.
that story? And then you tell me that story and you go, wait a minute.
Oh.
I know all sorts of people doing a podcast. I'm going to call her tomorrow, you
Mhm.
know? And the
That's what we
growth
did.
mindset of like my big first positive psychology aha moment before I even started taking the classes was realizing I keep going even when I feel shitty. And oh my gosh, that's growth mindset, that you don't have to feel great to keep going. And I don't mean that in
Oh,
an unhealthy way. I just mean
right.
Yes. You don't
keeping
give up.
learning. I or you give up for a time and you rest, but I know I'll come back to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
another example to put this in terms more people might relate to, like a client who is like, I always work out and I always care about my diet, and then I will just totally give up on it. And I said to her, and you keep coming back.
Going back.
That cycle means you keep coming back. And it's not a zero sum game. This is for your life. So all those
Mhm.
times you come back to it count, and you can trust yourself to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Trust yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
That's one of my
you
mantras
don't
right
do
now.
things.
I trust myself. It's a hard
Yeah,
one and it's so helpful.
it's a
Like I can
really hard
walk
one.
into a situation where I feel nervous and just be like, I trust myself. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
I love that, but I'm thinking that there's probably people who are like easier said than done. Like that's a
right.
process too in
Oh
itself,
Yeah.
yeah.
is having that trust. And I don't know. Part of
That's
my
a
thing
rewiring too, don't you think?
that
Like
is
you have to
because
teach yourself that you do trust yourself.
I don't know where I heard this, but I feel like it's going to be somewhere like Dr. Phil or something like 20 years ago. And I'm not going to want it. I'm going to pretend it was like in some intellectual book. And one of our listeners is going to be like, yeah, that was Dr. Phil, 1997. But it was this idea of when you make commitments or when you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, like that's training yourself not to trust yourself. And I don't know if that is true or not, but it was kind of like broken promises that you make yourself. Like I tell
Yeah.
myself that I'm gonna, write 100 words a day. I guess it should be 1,000. I'm gonna write if I can write
No,
100,
maybe it should be
or
Sometimes
maybe
100.
it's
it is
100.
100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you continually don't do that, that degrades the trust that you have in yourself. And so part
Yeah.
of that then is building back up and taking the responsibility to maybe do some of the things that you say to yourself that you're
Mhm.
going to do.
Well, and as your coach, I would say, tell me about a time you did trust yourself. Let's go there.
Yes. Ooh, see,
What
that's
can we
that
draw from
positive
that?
psychology there.
Isn't
That's
it
how it
annoying?
works.
I'm like the worst.
Well, and you say that and I'm like, I don't know. Like my brain immediately
Yeah.
freezes.
Yeah.
Fully
But you
gone.
know what?
She's
I
gone.
bet an hour from now you're going to be driving somewhere and you're going to be like, I remember a
I
time.
remember.
Like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
like that idea. Same thing with the gratitude, where you get in the practice of
Practice.
thinking about gratitude throughout the day because you're like, if I have to write this in a journal tonight, I don't want to be like
Yes.
scrambling for something. So your brain is just automatically. So, yes, if we put that, I'm going to put that question in my head now is like, remember a time when I did trust myself. And it will. Then I'll probably like throughout the day have 5 or 6 times where it's like, oh, this time, bink, this
Well,
time,
and then
bink.
Yeah.
give yourself, either write those prompts somewhere or give yourself 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to write about it. Like dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the information you're going to find there. What actually happens to your brain as you are revisiting it helps you
Mm.
savor it and be able to recall it better. It's just like when you're writing, you start remembering things you never would have remembered. It's just the same kind of thing.
Yes.
Our brains are vast, confusing places.
Oh,
They need a little help
yes.
sometimes.
You're so amazing. The more I learn, the more I want to learn. It's
Yes.
so
Yes.
exciting. Oh, and you get to do this now for a living. How exciting.
It
Continually
fills
learning.
me with zest, which is one of the 24 strengths that used to be so low on my profile. And but it does. I realized like it wasn't just positive psychology, it was specifically positive psychology coaching, which I mean, I'm using it everywhere anyway. Like somebody might not ever say, I need positive psychology coaching. They just might need help with the project or getting unstuck. But I'm
Mhm.
using these
Yeah.
tools, and just asking people questions and watching them light up from their own words thrills me. Thrills me.
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good place for us to say, where do people find you?
Yes,
Are
exactly.
Oh,
you are your sessions available online to get
I'm
in
a
touch?
100% Zoom. So as long as you have a connection, or if you insist, just a phone, if you hate Zoom, you can find me at listenlifecoaching.com, and you can look around my website, sign up for a free 30-minute consultation, or my 5-minute mood lift, which is,
I
so
love
you'll find all
those.
this there, where you get just short tips, tools, sometimes guided meditations to just lift your day.
Yeah, they're great. I look forward to
Yes.
those landing in my inbox.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely sign up to get those because, yeah, it is. Because sometimes you're not at a place where you can even proactively go get it. It's nice to
Yeah.
just literally have it landed, have the universe send it to
Right.
your inbox, or at
Yep.
least Anne send
Yeah.
it to your
Yep.
inbox. So that,
Yeah. Even with all that we're learning, and we do talk to people almost every day, I still sometimes forget that I am supposed to be practicing gratitude or looking for
Well,
positive things. And
and you got to
it's nice to have
find
a
what
reminder.
works for you. Like, Nancy Davis co-wrote 50 letters
Yeah.
in a year
where's
ish,
my book?
her thank
Yeah,
you project book. And
here it
I've written
is.
like 2 in a year.
Yes.
Right.
But I went and I read them to my parents, which was also based on Merton Seligman in one of his positive psychology books. Like he made the gratitude visit. So like use
Oh, uh-huh.
doing what works for you.
Hmm.
And then it will change. So you're talking about like the nightly gratitude journal, like writing 3 things that went well. It could just be 3 things that went well. But if you get sick of that, it's not going to work anymore. Start writing 3 things you're looking forward to tomorrow. And it can be
Oh,
coffee, quiet, and granola. But it
Right.
doesn't matter because you are priming yourself for a good night's sleep by thinking about what am I looking forward to tomorrow in my life?
yes. Oh, I like that too.
Yeah. I like that too. I think I'm going to add that to my
I need a
It
bigger.
takes it takes all of them for me, you guys. I have to do all of the practices every day.
Yes.
yeah.
But and I
Yeah.
like that point of if something isn't working for you, like find something
Find what
else. Yeah,
does.
find what does, tweak it, whatever you need to do to
Yeah.
make it more meaningful for you.
Because
Yeah, we're
like my
not all cut
clients,
from the same cloth.
Yeah.
right? My clients were like, I cannot meditate. I hate it. I'm like, that's not what
Then
we're
we'll
gonna
do it.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, instead of
Oh,
forcing it, I tried to force my
Yeah.
children to meditate. I just don't think they're meditators, or at
and they
least not
just may not be
now.
yet. Yeah.
Not
Not
yet.
now.
Yeah, not yet. And I would try. I decided it was when I originally learned a little bit about brain science. And I was like, we are going to rewire your little brains. And we are going to every day after school meditate for a little while so that you can then move into the next phase of the day. I had this
Which
plan. It
is
was
video
just
games that reverse everything you
right.
just did.
Oh
right.
no,
On
kids are
paper, this plan was beautiful. And my kids, I'm going to open my eyes and they'd be sitting there looking at each other like,
no kids are too smart. They smell this from a mile away. Like when
yeah.
I used to try to practice great parenting tools I found online, we'd be sitting at the table and I'd say like, tell me what you learned today instead of like, how was your day? And I swear my 6-year-old would be like, is this something you learned from the internet?
I have one would go, did you have lunch with your mom friends today? Uh-huh.
They can
I
read it
did.
from a mile away.
Yeah, they would know that we sat around the table and discussed these things.
Yeah.
We'd be like, yep, I can tell you talked
Oh,
to so and so today.
yeah. What did you tell them about me?
Or just when they were really little, you don't sound like you.
Right. Oh, you're right. They'd see it from a mile away. They're like, yeah, you have your teachy voice on.
Oh, why are they so dang smart? Oh my gosh. And speaking of which, I wanted to, but we're running into the time for the look, listen, learns here. But yeah, I'm really curious since you've got kids and kind of the same upper ages like we do in planning for future life in college and all those
Yes,
things. Interviewing 8 months worth of career and life coaches is it's a really good thing, but it's also kind of freaking me out. Like, cause I'm like,
totally.
we should really be thinking about a lot of these things. Probably should have been thinking about it, throughout their childhood. But, now when some big decisions are coming down the road, it's a good time to start maybe about some of these things, what some of those core strengths are and your core values. And
Yes, I just said I'm right with you, Suzanne. I feel like behind the ball. And it actually pivots right into what I was thinking about. One of the things in the look, listen, learn, one I've been reading and listening to some of this. I'm just learning a lot about college admissions. And I think it's fascinating that I had
oh,
never
tell
known.
me, yes.
Especially with like the elite schools. I read this book, Valedictorians at the Gate, which is all about elite schools and how, I mean, nutshell, they encourage as many students as they can to apply. intentionally so they can reject as many and keep their elite status. Like, it is dark, you guys,
It
and
is
it's
dark.
Oh,
really important to know. Are you about to pull that from the shelf or something?
Julie Lithcott-Ames.
Okay.
I can't recommend her enough as far as kind of this
Okay.
college. She was not in the admissions, but she worked at Stanford and had
Yeah.
I know you know Jess Leahy.
Yeah.
She kind of had her original book was very in the same vein of The Gift of Failure, was How to Raise an Adult. And they were kind of published buddies. Like their books came out at the same time and they kind of ran the same circuit, which is where we learned about her. And got, yeah, these stories that you hear about. Her point was about the umbrella parents who don't let their kids even come to, college admissions alone.
But some of these books also have really helpful tools. Like, for instance, just that your essay shouldn't be repetitive of what's already in your application. Like, maybe that's obvious to everyone, but like if I hadn't have read that, my senior is just an excellent student. That's just part of who he is. So I would have thought, oh, we're definitely going to talk about that. That's not what he's going to talk about in his essay at all, because
Mm,
that's evident already.
mhm.
So it's
Right.
how you make yourself a more fleshed out person to them. And yes, I just said to him this morning, I know mentioned the VIA strength assessment to you. Knowing your strengths is going to give you some vocabulary to be able to articulate what it is about you that will be a good
Mhm.
fit to this program, this university, whatever it is.
Right.
So there's, and like when you're asking for teacher recommendations, like remind them who you are, remind them of some connection you had, and tell them what you've been doing since. Like practical tips like that.
Mhm.
There's a podcast called The High School Hamster Wheel that was started by
Ooh,
a mom friend of mine. And it's just a half an hour, super practical.
yeah.
So I feel just like you, a little behind the ball, but
Oh, yeah.
also just if you don't have a kid who's like laser focused, it is known since he was in seventh grade that she wanted to
Right.
be an engineer and has done robotics and, blah, blah, blah. It's a really good thing to be a generalist. It's easier to get into programs if you're going to be a generalist, just figure out. So, there's a lot of good
That's
news to
good to
be
know.
had. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
Yeah,
lot of
because I
good
have a
news.
kiddo who's like,
We're not supposed to know. I mean, I still, I'm
We
just
don't
figuring this
know.
out. Right.
yeah, that's why
Yes.
we're doing
Um,
this podcast because we don't
yeah,
have a clue.
exactly. And so, um, I could go on and on because it's giving me some tools and also just kind of like, I really do want to stay out of it, but it's this balance with older kids all the time of like,
Yeah.
how much do I guide and nag and how much do I let them
Mhm.
experience natural consequences or whatever,
Nope.
Yes. I
Yeah, we
know.
hired a coach for that very reason, and
Yes,
I'm
which
still
is,
going to have to guide and nag, but I'm paying her to do some of the
yes,
nagging. In
Yeah.
fact,
that
I'm
is,
gonna nag
yes.
her today to nag him.
Check.
I mean, we're
Professionally nag.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So we're early on that front. Like
Yeah.
he's just a sophomore, but I know
Oh,
there's a couple things she wants us to do this year,
Oh,
yeah.
and
geez.
we haven't scheduled that meeting. And wait,
Mm.
like there's just some things she was going to sit down and go over with him, so he had them in his head. And so I'm going to remind her today that we
Oh,
need to
Lord.
schedule that meeting. But
My eye's gonna start twitching.
Well, I can make you better. I can make you feel better after I met with a local like college expert who's so funny and so informative. I came back and I was said to my youngest son, who's like sometimes said something about business school. I said, like, well, I found out math is really important and we might want to like double up on math classes. And he's eating a cereal, doesn't even take a pause and is like, guess I'm not going to business school.
I love
He
it.
wasn't like, oh,
Check, cross
thank
that one
you.
off.
Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, thank you. Let's go sign up. No.
It's
And
like I'm
even
not doing that.
even with my older son, I was like, well, I found out the University of Minnesota's like College of Engineering is really excellent. And he's like, and in computer science. And he goes, I'm not really that interested in computer science anymore. I don't even know if I know what engineering is. I was like, okay, back to generalist.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so glad we're all in the same book. And that makes me feel
I
better
know.
to know that as
Good.
the professional that you are encountering the same things
Oh,
that I am.
It's just so different than when we all went to school.
It is. It
Oh yeah,
is.
it's
I
just
applied to one school and I didn't even have to write an essay, and that's where I went.
Yes, University of Idaho was
Yeah.
amazing. Like I applied 3 months ahead of time, and it was just like filling out the paperwork at the dentist's office. It was like, here I come.
Yeah,
Get my room ready.
here's my
Yeah.
check. I will be there.
Yes, here's my
Yeah.
$800.
Yeah.
Now we're like starting. Someone told me we should do our start college visits this spring. I was a sophomore. Like
That
I never looked at a school. I don't know. On a couple of vacations we went and looked at nearby schools, but
okie dokie.
I didn't grow up with the whole college tour tradition. We were like
No.
Midwest practicality. Like we have an excellent institution right in our backyard.
great.
If you're not going to go there, that's how much money we'll give you to go somewhere else. And I
Yeah.
was just like that huge college book. I was like, Florida has palm trees. I mean, literally. I was not ready to go pay bazillions of dollars to
Right.
go out of state if Florida has palm trees was my
Right. Right. I
guiding-
was going to go to
guiding
Colorado
light.
because they had mountains.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
you know
eventually
what?
I worked myself through that and didn't do that. But yeah, that was my first. I was
After
like, yeah,
10
I'm-
years in Texas, I'm ready to go somewhere that has some mountains.
Oh,
I'd
gosh,
pay for
right?
my daughter I get to go visit her there.
Yeah, I am
Oh
kind of
my
hoping my
gosh.
kids pick somewhere with something else.
Or
Ah.
you could like rent a condo for probably a lot cheaper. Suzanne, just
That's
take your
true.
own visits.
True.
That's true. You know what? I'm following Wendy Aarons on her trip to London this
Yes.
week
Yeah.
and seeing she found some incredible deals in London. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna
she's my good friend. Wendy's on my text chat, so yes.
Yeah.
yes, I'm gonna
I can't
learn more
believe
about
she's
that.
there.
I know, but so those were some amazing. That was part of your look, listen, learn,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So Missy, I know we're getting close. You got 1 minute to do your look,
Talk
listen, learn,
fast.
Missy.
Okay. I
30
will talk
seconds, 'cause I didn't do
super
mine.
Well, I never talk fast. I'll try. One is, I don't know if you can see that, Mary Oliver's Devotions. I finally picked up a copy of this. I don't own any copies of her work. It's a thing that I have read all my life. You know, it shows up all over the place. She's quoted everywhere. It's all stuff that's in my awareness. But I
Mhm.
thought I've never actually really studied the work. I was a lit major, but I didn't really do a lot of poetry. So anyway, I'm studying that right now, and I just love every bit of it. Highly recommend that. And then my son is having to read 1984.
Oh my gosh.
This is my copy from high school.
Yes.
He didn't want it though because, first of all, I don't know if y'all can see this for people on YouTube. I mean, it's so tiny. Like, what is this? The words are this big, but even he, with his good young eyes, didn't want that. But he said the pages are all yellow and old, and I'm afraid they're going to fall out.
Yeah.
So,
there might be some
um,
food droppings in there or something.
Yeah, my name is scribbled in a couple places. But anyway, since he was reading it, I thought I'm going to pick up my copy and reread it. And read about 2 pages. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know, guys, but I'm going to try.
Because our reality is
prophetic.
so much worse than that even could have predicted.
Yes.
I remember
Yes.
hating the idea of it when I read it in high school. Like, oh, this is so awful what he's talking about. And now
Oh
it's
my
even harder to
gosh.
read.
But that was
You-
before Big Brother literally became a game show on television.
Yes.
And now we're like 20 years past that.
Past that. Yeah, it's a lot harder to read. I mean, I opened it and was just like, oh, yeah, I hope this
Oh.
isn't like a how-to manual for somebody.
Oh.
You know, I
so we're gonna
listened
see.
to
We'll see.
that. I listened to that when Handmaid's Tale originally came out. So I was like 1-2 punching those, and
Yeah, you're
during the Trump
dystopian.
administration, I know I was like, what am I doing to myself? But yeah, I encourage people to read it though. I mean, it really, especially like the Ministry of Changing News, like they literally will they will
Oof.
disappear any
Yep.
factual accounts of this and then reprint like what they want
Actually
to
makes me
have
feel kind of sick.
people think
Sorry.
happened. I was like, that sounds pretty close, but
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
But on a brighter side, my look.
Yeah, if you have something happy.
I'm doing a listen, and you kind of mentioned this too about like the different things that we have at different points in our lives. Where the soundtrack of when I started my final job was Moby. It's when we used to go to New York for a bunch of client visits. I have my first clients, lucky me. Before we became public and we didn't have to like show anybody our bills at Avenue A, we would just be like, let's go to New York 20 times this month. And it felt like all the bars were always playing Moby, and that's what always I had on my AirPods. And so I decided I hadn't listened to it, I think, since then. And since I'm in my nostalgia tour of watching Sopranos right now for some reason, which I remembered I do have a reason. They have a new movie coming out. It's like a prequel. It's like the story of the uncle.
Oh, I did. I did see
and
that.
it actually has James Gandolfini's son playing him. So I remembered because the new trailer came out for it this week, and I was like, "That's why we're watching The Sopranos." But
okay, I was about to ask if we could delve into your psyche of why you're on this.
Why I'm just
retro
reliving
tour of
the 90s.
Yeah.
I miss appointment television and how it gave us all one thing to talk about. Like,
yes,
I love all this amazing content, but we are never going to catch up, and we are never going to be on the same page. Like,
never. Although, you know what? I didn't even do Sopranos as appointment television. I did it as the original Netflix, back when they just used to do DVDs.
Yeah.
So we did it like that.
That's how we watched Entourage, was on.
Yeah.
We'd have to send it back and get another one.
But it's just, I've been finding it very interesting. And then especially even with my little retro Apple AirPods here, the other thing that I used to listen to walking from my bus to work was Citizen Cope. And it was when I was working on the Apple account. So I was just like, even writing Citizen Cope while I was looking at myself in the camera with these on, I was like having this full body, like, oh, I'm going to one of my Apple meetings, because I always had to have these near me. Like, look at, I am supporting your product.
No, I had to present once at Apple with a Microsoft laptop.
Oh my God. No, I can't
believe you survived that.
I can't
believe nobody anticipated that and set me up in a better situation.
Yeah. I can one up that because they were my client. But we had the Apple laptops, but we presented to, what is the name? It's their PowerPoint. Keynote. Keynote.
I was like, I'm about to open it. It's Keynote. Yeah.
We presented to the Keynote team on PowerPoint. I just didn't even know it.
Oh my God. And I was like waiting for my laptop to start, going through, and she was like, if this was an Apple, it would have already started. And I was just like,
oh my God.
But I don't have one of those.
This is about entertainment tonight. This isn't even about that. This has been my ad sales years.
Oh, I know.
Painful.
I'm sure. Yeah. And our company's ad serving software and all of our stuff that we did only worked on PCs. So that was a fun one to have to explain every time that we set up some technology.
You should definitely advertise with us for sure.
Yes. Give us your money. We really support you, because look at, I got the headphones.
Well, they knew they had us all suckered in from the beginning, even if you at that moment didn't have the stuff.
No, that was even before iTunes. We launched iTunes after that, but that was just when the original. I even have the one that spins around.
Yes,
like that's how you used to select.
Yeah.
My kids looked at it and they're like, "Is this like a paperweight? Like, what is about the size of this phone? Like with the
one of my kids used it for a while as his music source, and at some point it wasn't supported. You couldn't put anything on it anymore.
Yeah,
but it had some music on it, and he would bop around listening to whatever was in there.
The 5 songs that fit on it.
yeah.
Oh my goodness! Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. We've
good to see you, even
you
through the
too.
computer.
Yes.
Both
and
of you.
a little trip down memory lane.
Yeah, I listened to some of your text chat group one, and I was so heartwarmed when you mentioned listen to your mother, like right away. How you
so
all
many
knew
of us
other.
are connected that way.
I just love the whole ripple effect. It's just amazing. And
it is so great. Yeah, we probably bring up more than you can even imagine. Listen to your mother and the Mom 2.0 conference. I think either one might come up anytime.
Super connectors,
yeah. It's just these super connector events and things that are just so special. And yes, we're so honored to have been part of it. And this is, I feel like I'm kind of meeting the queen. Like I've never.
Back to my headset.
She's a princess.
I know, the princess. I do like the Princess Leia, and I really think that you should patent that design.
Yeah, I'm going to. Right after we get off the phone.
There you go.
I was going to
Oh,
look before we talked, and I'll let you go. Do the grade school columnist pieces still exist
Oh,
anywhere?
you're so sweet.
It's so funny. Those were so damn funny.
Anne's Rants doesn't really exist. Like
I didn't think it did.
I think it's folded into anneimig.com, and I think I have like made all that old blog stuff private, but
Yeah.
I bring it out sometimes. Like I've experimented with different manuscripts. You never know. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I loved grade school columnist. I'd love to see her come back.
I mean,
She's a genius.
if you love her, she was really influenced by Linda J. Barry. So who's a
Okay.
cartoonist, and I grew up reading her stuff, and she writes kids like nobody, and it's graphic novels, really.
Yeah.
Her
Oh,
work's amazing, and
Okay.
she's actually local here, but you got to check her out.
oh, that's a good look
Okay.
too.
Yeah,
Will do.
yeah. All right,
Wonderful.
cool.
All right.
Well, thank you again so much for
Thank
being
you.
part
Thanks
of
for
this show.
having
This
me.
is
This
really
is
special.
super fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, and
Okay.
best of luck to
Bye.
you in all your
Yes.
new endeavors.
Thanks.
Yes,
You guys
thank you.
too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the Mom and podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show today. And if you know someone else who could benefit from today's episode, be sure to share it with them. Also, please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find links to all the things we discussed today in the show notes over at our website, momandpodcast.com, with the AND spelled out. In between shows, you can find us at the socials, including our private mom and community Facebook group. You can find links to the group, all of our socials, and our questions and comments section over at our website, momandpodcast.com. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you so much. Now go out there and make your ellipses count.